Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are located. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Ferris Taylor, Executive Director of the Healthcare Executive Group, and today's discussion topic will be led by Appian, our HCEG Gold Technology Partner, on the topic of The Doctor Can't See You Now, New Ways to Speed Up and Improve Provider Onboarding. We appreciate your engagement and your interest on this topic, so welcome to the webinar. HCEG is a national network of executives and industry leaders. We're celebrating our 31st year in working together to improve and reshape healthcare. We interact regularly across multiple channels, such as these monthly webinars, periodic executive leadership roundtables, white papers, digital media, newsletters, and our annual forum each September. By facilitating these frequent interactions, we provide a platform for networking and industry thought leadership. You can learn more about HCEG and how we convene and facilitate the healthcare industry by going to hceg.org. Throughout the year, culminating in our annual forum, our members discuss and debate critical issues, challenges, opportunities, and priorities in healthcare. We then formally vote and rank an HCEG top 10 list for the coming year. Today's webinar will focus specifically on our 2019 HCEG priority number 8, operational effectiveness. But this topic also touches on several of the other challenges you see here on the screen, including number 1, data and analytics, number 4, value-based payments and value-based relationships, and number 5, the digital health organization. The Appian team and their clients and their partners are industry thought leaders on these and other HCEG top 10 issues, as you will hear today. To facilitate today's webinar, let me turn the presentation over to Kate McConnell, Appian's global industry leader for the healthcare payer space, to introduce and facilitate today's panel. Kate, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Ferris, and thank you to HCEG for this opportunity to speak today on The Doctor Can't See You Now, how to speed up and improve provider onboarding. We have a number of great speakers today on this panel, and we're going to hear from all of them. Let me briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves before we get started with today's panel discussion. My name is Kate McConnell. I'm the global industry leader for healthcare payers at Appian. I've been in the healthcare industry for almost 20 years as a product executive and a consultant, working primarily within payer strategy, payer operations, claim optimization, and EDI. I am so pleased to have with me today 3 other panelists. First, I'm going to ask Fritz to introduce himself, then my colleague Kirsten and Ryan. I do want to call out that Kirsten and Ryan are joining us from 2 partner companies with Appian, and they'll be talking about their work with us in the healthcare payer and provider spaces. But please introduce yourself, Fritz.
Hey, Kate, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is Fritz Heimberger with Appian. Similar to Kate, while Kate looks after our healthcare payer division, I look after our healthcare provider division here at Appian. Coming up on my 5th anniversary with the company, have been in the healthcare world in a clinical revenue cycle as well as technical perspective for about 20 years now, with an engineering background. Nashville, Tennessee is home for me. So thanks for having me, Kate.
Thank you so much, Fritz. Kirsten, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone. I'm Kirsten Pruka, VP of Digital Enterprise for Luxoft. We are a global digital strategy and software engineering company working with many industry verticals, but I specialize in the healthcare industry, working with both payers and providers, pharma companies, etc. We mainly focus on digital transformation services and software development, but we are also experts in blockchain and have a very strong business process management service through Appian.
Thank you, Kirsten. I appreciate that. Ryan, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Kate. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Bandaputty. I'm an associate director with Bits and Glass. I line up under our Appian line of business, one of 3 lines of businesses that we have. I oversee project implementations and provide support for our sales team, and looking forward to speaking today. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks so much. So why don't we kick it off? I'll go through our agenda. I will say that this is being recorded by HCEG and the slides will be available after the presentation. Participants should also notice that there should be a window to ask questions of the panel, and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. So kicking it off with our agenda, first we're going to talk about what is provider and clinician onboarding. Just do an introduction, look at the 2 views from the sides of the payers and the providers, talk a bit about the current state and the challenges that we've been seeing out in the marketplace. We're also going to talk about considerations if you or your healthcare organization are thinking about improving your provider onboarding capabilities and starting new initiatives. And we'll address tools and technology solutions for that. And then, as I mentioned at the end, we'll take questions. So why don't we get started first with sort of the 2 views of provider or clinician onboarding. Let me take the payer view. So from the payer view, it's really the final step in what is often a very challenging process of putting together a provider network strategy, then recruiting providers to fit that strategy, and then going all the way through the credentialing and contracting phases of the process. So we're doing it as payers because it fulfills our network strategy and, more importantly, our duty to members to allow them to see the doctors they want to see in their geographies. But from a payer point of view, what we see our customers really struggling with is it's a highly administrative function. And at its heart, it doesn't have a lot of value added to them. You have to complete it, you have to do it well. It's more or less clinician and provider onboarding is more or less a report card on whether or not you have all of your activities lined up in this area. So turning to the provider view, Fritz, what are you seeing from your provider customers in terms of clinician onboarding?
Sure. So not completely dissimilar. Certainly on the provider side of the house, it is a long and arduous process. Starting out with, those recruiting tools that are out there, those kind of building of your pipeline of potential physicians, potential clinicians to fill gaps in your service delivery process within your health, within your integrated delivery network, within your health system. Being able to get those docs into the pipeline, then being able to get them fully recruited, get them hired, then truly comes that onboarding process of getting your typical HR paperwork done, getting your governmental paperwork done, then certainly rolling into your payer credentialing. It is a very long and arduous process. And as you said, from that last bullet there, the fact that it is highly administrative with low value add, that's certainly true. Things that we wish we could automate, things that we wish we could kind of take those human tasks and put those humans onto significantly more higher value add work, as opposed to this very same menial task of doing the same thing over and over and over again. But as you mentioned, it just has to be done. There's no 2 ways around it.
Absolutely. So we have this activity on both the payer and provider sides. And why don't we continue our definitions by looking at a further breakdown of the key onboarding activities. And we mentioned before that onboarding is really the culmination of all of the activities that happened before. So to onboard a provider in a payer's systems and network is really to get all of their information validated and then entered into systems. So as we mentioned, it's a report card on how well did you do in all of the prior steps. So how well did I do in my provider network management, in my strategy and my recruitment function? How well am I doing in getting my contracts either created for new contracts or amended as we need to with our providers from time to time? Am I getting all the data updates and corrections correct across all of my systems? Are my terminations up to date? And then the same in credentialing and contracting, my new credentialing activities for new providers that we're bringing into the network, re-credentialing providers that are already in our networks, their periodic attestations, and then the contract administration. You can see how all of these activities add upon each other. And so it's imperative that we have a good view of what's going on, as well as be able to get things moving if things are snarled in particular ways. This is a highly complex process, and continuing on with data management, once we enroll the providers in our systems and in our networks, we have constant monitoring to make sure those updates and corrections are done. Fritz, from a clinician onboarding side, I think the providers have similar administrative activities that also need to be done, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So as I just mentioned a moment ago, I kind of jumped my own gun here. Absolutely, starting, like I said, with that recruiting aspect, that finding those physicians, finding those clinicians to fill up a very, shall we say, light pipeline these days. We know that we have a huge clinician shortage here in the States, be it physicians, be it nurses. So being able to keep that pipe full, just as you would in any sales organization, is going to help you to remit folks to those various openings and get them filled, such that you can indeed then proceed on through state licensure verifications, Fed licensure verifications, working your way through education verification. Many times, if you've got a particular physician that's coming on board as a clinician, he or she may also be brought on in a didactic and an academic perspective. So certainly wanting to verify that if you're offering somebody an associate or an assistant professorship at a particular institution, that you're validating all of their education, you're validating all of their credentials from a publishing perspective. Certainly working your way through offer determination, making sure T's and C's are squared up. And then finally, once all of those steps have been completed, then starts the whole new arduous process of getting things credentialed with the payers, which we know can sometimes be easier if a particular provider and payer have a self-credential relationship, if there's a level of trust there that permits that, or if that's not the case, 2, 3, 4 months worth of a credentialing process with many back and forths certainly is not a quick or efficient process for any interested parties.
Wow, that is a great way to think of it, as both sides are dependent on each other. Both have a lot of administrative functions to fulfill, and really just no good ways to get all of these things done in a really quick and efficient manner. So why is that? One of the things we see as consultants out working with payers and providers across the industry is really that payers and providers have purchased many systems, and there are lots of terrific off-the-shelf applications to manage different parts of this long process. There are great credentialing applications. There are great contract management applications. There's tools to put your provider network together. However, what we have seen is that they're often running in very either siloed business functions, or they're running truly in siloed technology stacks. So putting the data together when each system uses a different view of what a provider or a network looks like is very difficult. And increasingly, at least from the payer standpoint, we're being asked to know really what's going on with our provider networks in a more or less 360-degree view, so that we can understand who we have in the pipeline and who's going to be available after the new benefit year starts. I think, Fritz, on your side for clinicians, same struggle. How do we know who are we recruiting and when they're going to be ready to see patients?
Absolutely. So having that kind of visibility is not something that's typically in the cards today. With these 16, 14, 15, 16 different systems, and similarly the same number of different divisions of a health system having to touch a particular candidate coming through the pipeline, coming through that process, the visibility into where he or she truly stands at any given point is almost impossible. The thought of having a kind of a follow me type trajectory, such that if the candidate himself calls in, or perhaps a previous employer calls in, or a drug screen company calls in with results or sends results back, to be able to know exactly where that particular person is throughout the process at any given time is next to impossible. So the thought of being able to bring that together really is kind of a novel but paramount thought in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. So to sum up, when you're running a highly complex and regulated business process, and you're running it on siloed applications, oftentimes with a lot of manual process steps that have to be done, you have to ask, what can go wrong? Well, I think we all know what the end result yields. So let's talk about it from the payer and provider view. Kirsten, we've put up a couple of statistics about what payers are seeing going wrong in this process. Just to pick out, Medicare Advantage audits by CMS have found that about 50% of provider directories have inaccuracies. Payers are taking on average 120 days to credential a provider. I mean, what have you seen in your practice with Luxoft that points to some of these things going wrong in the field?
So much can go wrong, Kate, and that's really where Appian can help keep things on track, right? So as we know, the inaccurate directories not only can result in a fine, but it can impact your stars ratings, which isn't good. And then you've got to look at all of these multiple diverse sources of information. The DEA, the state medical boards, where they went to medical school, confirmation of all that. And if you're a provider that attended medical school outside of the US, that can present a more interesting challenge to obtain the appropriate school records in a timely way to get the provider on board in your network. Any delays can also impact any VIP clients that you have who really expect their providers to be added to the network quickly.
Well, that's true. And just to leave you with a statistic, the estimate is that payers spend more than $2 billion a year maintaining their provider databases. Wow. So let's turn to the provider side. Fritz, I know you were telling me kind of a real life story out in the field from some people that you knew at a major health system about how long it was taking to onboard a provider in a specific specialty and how much it was costing them.
Absolutely, Kate. So yeah, one of my good friends looks after this specific area for one of our large IDNs in the Southeast. And she was actually letting me know that they had a somewhat rural hospital, but still a decent sized city, not a massive city like in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, but a mid-sized town. And they were looking to fill an orthopedic surgeon position. Well, as such, because they were not able to, through the recruiting process, find enough folks that would be willing to move there. Once they found folks, getting them through their process, it was, like I said, long and arduous is just about the best way I can describe it. And it took them 2.5 years to get this orthopedic surgeon position refilled after the surgeon who had been there and had retired after 40 years of service had left. So, first and foremost, obviously, we're worried about being able to constantly and consistently provide that gold standard clinical quality of care to our patients that they've come to expect and that they should expect. We want to make sure that they can rely on us, that they feel good about that, and that they know that they will be well taken care of when they do walk through our door. And that was just not being provided at that time. And then certainly secondarily to that, but also important, was the financial aspect. And just the fact that this one position, they were estimating that they would do about $100,000 in billing a week. They would see $40,000 to $50,000 of that coming back in the form of remits, give or take. And over the course of 2.5 years, I mean, you do the math, $50,000 times 52 weeks in a year times 2.5 years. You're talking over $5 million in unbilled potential just because of a single physician position being left open in a single facility. So, if you're looking at this from a health system perspective, it is just incredible the damage that this could do if not looked at quickly, efficiently, and appropriately. No question.
Wow. There's real math and there's real numbers involved here. And at a time when provider organizations are looking at every penny in their revenue cycle, this seems to be a place where some attention paid could really pay large dividends. So, to sum up our current state, we've been talking about some of the challenges and issues. What we really see is in the final measure, for payers, what happens when provider onboarding doesn't flow well, you have incomplete networks and you have inaccurate directories. Down the road for providers, that adds up to physician shortages and unbillable providers, even when you do have the physicians. And then finally, for the patient or the member, this is where it all comes together and they experience poor access to care and long waits. So these are clearly situations we don't want to go on in our industry. We know we can do better. So let's start talking a little bit about what's driving the potential for change in this industry. Besides the actual financial impacts, the things that Fritz was talking about, there's a number of other strategic drivers that are making the industry want to evolve in terms of their provider and clinician onboarding. First, there is an increasing number of what we call payviders, or health plans that have a provider delivery arm to them, or provider organizations that are increasingly offering their own set of health benefits. So they clearly have to attack this problem from both sides. For a lot of health systems, we have the growing trend of employed physicians, which means you're now managing your physician base, obviously less like a contracted workforce and more like a workforce that works for you. So those changes have to be done much more smoothly and probably more frequently. For payers, we're seeing increasingly complex network strategies. There might be conditional networks, there might be networks that are hinged on provider performance, all kinds of other strategies and thoughts are going into these networks, and being able to actually implement them through the recruitment process is going to become increasingly difficult as the complexity grows, which is why we're beginning to hear prominent members of the industry calling for universal credentialing standards so that providers don't have numerous different standards depending on who the payer is that they're dealing with. And for payers to simplify, if I can just get one set of information and then I can unite my systems, I can make this process work a lot better. Along with systematic changes, we're seeing technology changes driving provider onboarding, innovation. One is a move toward cloud adoption. One of the things that happens when a healthcare organization moves into the cloud is a lot of times information is more freely available and more visible. So with that comes the pressure for greater reporting of that data. And if those systems are not united again at the database level and then also at the process level, you're going to end up with very difficult scenarios where you can't fulfill the reporting that you want and need to give to your stakeholders internally and externally. So we're going to start talking a little bit about how we might solve this challenge with technology. No surprise, all four of us on the panel today represent technologists in the healthcare industry. And what we're seeing is that both payers and providers have really invested in a lot of solutions for each step of that provider lifecycle management process. Providers, tell us that onboarding clinicians is different and a little more challenging and complex than onboarding other types of employees. But really, overall, what we're seeing is they both lack a single common view of the entire process. If we were in the manufacturing industry, we'd call provider onboarding part of our work in progress accounting. In this day and age, you have to be able to see all of the work that is in progress in your organization at any given moment in time. So because we have so many different siloed applications and solutions in the industry, what we are advising our clients is that an increasingly viable option is creating a custom solution for your organization rather than trying to reconfigure all of your COTS software to work together and speak to each other. And I'm sure you're all thinking, custom solution, gee, that will take a long time. You know, our IT folks are overwhelmed with delivering their current maintenance needs. But increasingly in the past couple of years, a technology based on low-code development has come up into the marketplace. We're going to talk a bit about low-code, but low-code really makes it possible to deliver your own custom solutions using agile delivery methods in very short time windows. So what does that really mean? Before we talk about that, I'd like to give a little bit more information about the companies that are represented on today's webinar. Let me just briefly introduce Appian. So Appian is a 20-year-old low-code software company. We have a platform for building enterprise software applications. Appian's key takeaway is you can build an Appian application once and you can run it on any device in your organization. You can run it on tablet, mobile, Apple Watch, as well as desktop. That's all part of low code. I'd like Kirsten to talk briefly about Luxoft and DXC.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So this slide shares some of the key numbers related to our new parent, DXC Technology. But adding to what you see here, Luxoft has over 19 years of experience working with healthcare life sciences companies internationally. We have 6 Luxoft delivery locations and currently employ over 3,300 software engineers.
That's great. So Luxoft and DXC have come together as of June 2019 and are working together.
Correct.
Great. And then Ryan, would you please introduce Bits and Glass?
Sure. So Bits and Glass is a professional services and software consulting firm. Obviously, we partner with Appian and have been a partner since 2008. We also have 2 other lines of businesses. The first one focusing on systems integration. We partner with a company called MuleSoft, and that has been since 2013. And then more recently, we've been a partner with Blue Prism with a focus on robotic process automation. In the US, we're headquartered in Denver with satellite offices in Dallas and soon to be New York. And then in Canada, we're headquartered in Edmonton with other offices in Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal.
Great, thank you. And I should add, Appian is really grateful that both Luxoft and Bits and Glass joined us on today's panel, but also really for their work out in the field to implement solutions on behalf of healthcare customers and customers in other industries. Appian wants to build the very best software possible, and we need our partners to help deliver that out to the field. So I want to thank both Kirsten and Ryan for joining us today. We said we were going to talk about considerations for provider onboarding transformation before we talk about the technology solutions that we are seeing be highly successful in the industry. So I'm going to call on Kirsten to help me talk about the top 5 considerations. I'm going to start with number 1. The first thing we advise our clients is to tailor your solution for the very best user and customer experience. That sounds simple, but it really starts with design thinking to help visualize what the end state that you want your customer experience to be, both for the users internally and for your member or provider out in the market. Kirsten, could you talk about number 2?
Sure. Well, robotic process automations are already helping provider groups and health plans automate what have previously been manual and very cumbersome procedures, right? This has had a very positive impact on the healthcare community and has been able to allow them to reduce costs while improving accuracy. Blockchain, which I will talk about after this slide, has multiple applications, very exciting. And I believe it's going to transform healthcare as we know it today.
Yeah. So I think you're saying let's make sure we design with future changes in mind, because who knows what's right around the corner, right? We can see some of these technologies now and
Yes.
some in the future. Yeah, alongside that, number 3 consideration, I would say reduce the need to rewrite your existing systems as your business changes. You want to make your solution future-proof, and you want to limit the impact on your existing systems, because you really have to keep running your company while you're doing these transformations. Kirsten, what about number 4?
Well, yeah, so, and this is where Appian comes back in. When you can employ a platform system like Appian, it really will take the guesswork out of the entire onboarding and credentialing process. With Appian, plan and provider leadership will always know where a provider is in the credentialing process, who has been responsible for completing the process, and whether all the steps have been followed.
Well, that's great. So we're talking about building that auditability and reporting right from the start.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then the 5th consideration is obviously, as you're doing this, this is about a system that's enabled by your employees. Your employees who work in the provider and network area are valuable people and really should be doing work at the very top of their capabilities. So all of this technology consideration is really meant to elevate your employees and how they engage with their work on a day-to-day basis. So I promised that we would talk about low code. I will talk briefly about low code. So low code, in a nutshell, is instead of coding from scratch, you draw what you want in terms of a process flow or what you want that code to do, and it builds the program in the back end. And while that sounds like magic, it's really a very doable technology. You use logical flow charting. There are lots of wizards and pre-built objects and interfaces. There's reusable objects. So you build something once, or the software program has it built for you, and you just adapt it over and over again. And then the net of low code is that you can build once for all devices. And Forrester will tell you that low code building is actually 6 times to 20 times faster than custom code. But before you do that in your organization, you may have to make a business case for why you're building from low code, why you're doing something custom. Ryan, I know you've done a lot of work with clients around the business case for low code builds. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure, Kate. So one of the first things that I think about when comparing both approaches, being an off-the-shelf approach or a custom solution approach utilizing a platform like Appian, is actually more around the intangible benefits from going down the custom solution route. And when going down that route, and it actually forces the organization to bring together all of those affected teams to really work closely. So on the flip side, what we've seen is with an off-the-shelf approach, there isn't as much of an emphasis on assessing and decomposing the current state as there is with building a custom solution. There's almost a notion that problems are inherently solved with an off-the-shelf solution. So going back to a custom-built approach, you bring the teams together, and you'll actually find that things such as redundancies within the current state are actually happening across all these various teams because they're being forced to work together. And redundancies meaning more around the collection of information, specifically in the onboarding process. So you actually hear providers say, oh, I've given you this information multiple times over the course of filling out these required documents and being onboarded. So by bringing together these different teams, meeting with the subject matter experts involved, and really dissecting the entire workflow will help uncover these challenges and these bottlenecks and ultimately streamline and optimize the process at hand. And from a tailored application approach or perspective, custom solutions can actually help connect all of your disparate systems and data that is specific to an organization's unique needs. So really tailoring the application as it needs to be specific to that organization. If you think about it, solutions should be flexible as an organization's bylaws and actually regulations may evolve or different between organizations. Low-code platforms like Appian really do enable that flexibility by allowing those organizations to rapidly react to process changes and regulations that go into effect by allowing for easy configuration and deployment of functionality as needed, which is not always the case with off-the-shelf solutions. So, one example here, a very simple one is, obviously off-the-shelf solutions will have pre-built validation logic into their required forms and UIs that are configured. The same goes for, the end state of a custom app build. But what happens when those bylaws change or a new regulation is passed? You might find that you're stuck or unable to quickly adapt to these changes with that off-the-shelf solution. So a custom solution really allows for that flexibility and will allow you to make those changes and deploy them on the fly immediately, hence staying compliant. And lastly, around scalability, and I think we've touched on this a little bit earlier, but leading up to this is great. So organizations often, their strategies evolve over time. So there's always the need to or want to expand on the features and functionalities of the tool that's currently being built. This is where a custom application or a low-code platform like Appian comes into place, where we can really help the organization to expand on those new features that align with not only the solution roadmap, but then the corporate strategy, which will inevitably help your physicians during these processes and will help everyone stay compliant. A low-code platform like Appian will also help surface up the required information from your current multiple systems that you have, making that data actionable, and will provide the ability to apply custom behaviors based on specific business logic, event triggering, and so on. So another example here is there might be a simple application that's built, but then there might be a need to start keeping track of upcoming credential expirations to help take that burden off of your already busy physician staff. This is a great plugin for RPA, or robotic process automation, where a robot can actually do this on behalf of what that physician would do, what that human does, and actually speed up that process in the end.
Wow. Well, you've left us a lot to think about when you're making your business case for low code. So thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. I wanted to just give Kirsten a minute to talk about blockchain. Luxoft has been working in the blockchain area in healthcare and other industries for some time. And we mentioned that we would mention it. It is going to be something you'll see in provider onboarding and clinician onboarding. So Kirsten, could you give us just a couple of points about blockchain to take away when you're considering it?
Sure, I can. So I guess I'll have to condense my multiple pages of information here into a couple of points. But I think the first thing to begin with is the simple definition, which is that it is a trusted and efficient way of sharing data and transactions. In other words, blockchain is a single source of truth. It's been touted by many for its ability to secure data and then distribute it in an encrypted way to ensure that the most current information is available. So in a blockchain scenario, all of the provider's information needed for credentialing will be stored on the blockchains, making the trustworthy information available quickly to the entities that require it, but only when the provider gives the appropriate permissions. So it's interesting, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and there are actually a few blockchain pilots in process today, particularly as it relates to provider data accuracy and credentialing. It has many, many more applications, but assuming that these pilots are successful, it could lead to many more, ultimately resulting in an industry standard.
Yeah, I think what excites me tremendously, Kirsten, about blockchain is the ability for the providers to really maintain control of their information and be the ones to decide how they share it out. And I think it could take a lot of the friction out of what we are seeing in the credentialing and contracting and onboarding process. So I think as we look forward, yeah, looking out to some of those pilots that are going on, and potentially working with companies like Bits and Glass and Luxoft around that area could also put you in the forefront of some of those things.
And it's going to reduce costs for the provider too. They're not going to have to dedicate so many of their office resources to managing the re-credentialing process quarterly, annually, what have you. It will just streamline the entire process for them.
That's fantastic. And we saw the need for that earlier in the presentation. Well, we talked about technology solutions. So let me give you the strategic underpinnings of what an integrated platform for provider onboarding and related activities might be. So we're going to talk about it in the context of you building a low-code application that in a custom way is put together quickly, but it essentially corrals all of the different applications you have running for provider onboarding and uses their information for essentially improving the process. So we're showing this strategically with shared applications in the middle, where instead of all of your siloed applications being connected up into the different activities, you're coordinating everything from one central point. Another view of it that might be a good one for folks who are more technically minded is we can use Appian and have used Appian essentially to go into back-end systems. And this is a payer view where your business users are people in the provider recruitment area, enrollment, provider relations, and they're interacting with providers. The applications that they need to use are all in back-end systems now, and they're accessing those back-end systems. Instead of doing that, what we would do potentially with an Appian wrapper is pull in all of those activities into an Appian wrapper to be able to have a one single application that uses the functionality and the data that's embedded in your current systems, use it in a current new process, and then make it available for essentially a provider relationship management process and provider onboarding process to be conducted in real time. So we're not creating new databases, we're not supplanting existing systems. What we're doing is extracting the information that we need from those systems and using it in a new way in a low-code tool like Appian. We've found this very successful at clients and are excited about the opportunities we have at different clients to attack some of the problems that we talked about early on in the presentation. We've also been working with providers on this, and I'm going to call on Fritz to talk about the clinician onboarding solution and some of the work that we've done in that area.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, that there's certainly, it's a very fractured, very, like I said, long process to get these done on both the payer and the provider side. And, the thought of being able to pull all of these different, may I even maybe say divisions within a certain health delivery network, integrated delivery network, being able to pull all of those different fractured departments that all have a piece or a part of the whole into a single pane of glass, that single screen, reducing that swivel chair effect, being able to have the folks that are doing the initial physician or clinician recruiting, talking to the folks who are doing the licensure verification, talking to the folks who are doing the education verification, talking to the folks that are, on the back end of the hiring process, working with the particular individual getting his or her, access badging taken care of, or, information technology provisioning for all the different systems and getting their hardware, laptops, et cetera, set up. Being able to have that single pane of glass that allows any person in that continuum to at any given time see exactly where that particular clinician lies, be able to pinpoint it, be able to go get a question answered, be able to provide superior customer service to all of the different constituents along that continuum really is the name of the game here. So, we just have a few different views of some work that we have built here at Appian, just kind of showcasing, being able to see all of those different aspects of the process from a single screen, such that you aren't having to swivel chair amongst different panels, different screens, different systems. It's all being pulled into one single system that not only allows you it to be illustrated and shown on that single pane of glass, but almost more importantly, to be able to take that action back into all of those downstream systems from that single pane of glass. It's not just, there are plenty of systems out there that permit that visibility, right? Illustrating things easily. But I think the real differentiator is being able to take that bi-directional actionability back into those downstream systems without having to leave that single screen. That's really powerful. That's really a time saver. It's an efficiency gain. It is a customer service gain. It's a win-win-win on multiple fronts.
That's great, Fritz. I think we have time now for questions. So I want to thank all of the panelists so far, and let me go to the board for some questions. So one of the questions that's coming up is, here we go. How are organizations leveraging these new tools and technologies in the provider onboarding area? And I guess I'd ask Ryan if he wants to comment on that.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we're also a Blue Prism RPA shop, and kind of taking a step back and looking at what RPA actually does. It's a technology that's actually very flexible and is meant to mimic the processes exactly as your resources or staff do manually right now. By automating these standard processes or high volume tasks, organizations realize more accurate results and more certainty that the work is actually being done and or managed correctly. So think about tasks that require a lot of analysis from multiple systems or websites where a robot would complete this analysis on behalf of a human, and can defer any work to an actual human for additional review for any type of exception to that main process at hand. This lends itself very well into the credentialing space for healthcare, as there is this constant review needed to ensure that the employee or the provider network is compliant, everything's up to date, and has all of the appropriate credentials and items on file. So, one real life example related to RPA that we've seen, just to paint a little bit more of a picture, was where we saw an organization using robots to review medical credentials within a state's license site to determine if a provider is actively licensed or not, simply put. It's a very simple solution that not only saves time, where the robot can conduct these checks much faster than a human. It also eliminates that tedious manual, highly repetitive effort that a human would do. And the end result are a couple things. The process ends up producing a license compliance report, but the basis of that is that it's all accurate data that's provided in the end, and screenshots are captured and filed away in the subsequent HR systems, and all of that accurate data is then used for auditing purposes. So simply put, payers and providers both can utilize robotic process automation to simply spend less time on administrative tasks.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm seeing part of a question come in, and I might ask my conference moderator to help me with this. Not really a question, but a comment. Physician burnout is a real concern, and I can't see the whole question, but I think it's probably a question for Fritz. Can you comment on perhaps how some of the things we've been talking about can address the physician burnout issue?
Sure. So that's a very interesting question, especially as it relates to this. So much we talk in this space about, reducing the burden on clinicians, reducing the physician burden. Certainly in the electronic medical record world, a lot of these third-party ancillary clinical applications, we're looking for click reduction. We're looking to reduce what we call alert fatigue, the fact that, clinicians cannot get through half a screen without seeing 17 different warnings. And I think individually, they are certainly, a pain, no doubt about it. But if we can set the stage, for when a new clinician, new to us that is, when a clinician comes to our organization, potentially is going to be joining the organization, having a technology stack, having a platform play like this that allows, what could have otherwise been 15 different systems to be done in a single place with absolute ease of visibility into a process, reducing the pain on that doc or that nurse or whomever happens to be coming through the door from the get-go. It's very much a stage setter for the rest of his or her employment with that institution. Just being able to say, hey, Dr. Smith, Nurse Jones, whatever, we've got your back. We know this is hard. We know that you are here because you have a passion for patient care. Let us do whatever we can to ease that burden on you and let you get back to what you're doing. I think that's the real message here. So often, so many systems, so many entities just have trouble kind of slogging through and juggling these various systems just to get something as what should be relatively simple as onboarding completed. It really becomes a distractor. So I think the more we can focus on our customers, in this case, in the clinical world, many times that's patients, but we forget that our doctors, our nurses, our professional, our clinical professionals are customers as well. And in this age of consumerism, that we find ourselves today, treating them like customers and knowing that they truly can go elsewhere, just like we can for our healthcare, really puts an interesting spin on things that has traditionally been a kind of take it or leave it type mentality. Being able to give them that unbelievably awesome consumer experience out of the gate is, there's just no comparison. Being able to have that as, look what we can do for you, is a pretty awesome statement to make.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate you addressing that question, Fritz. I think we have time for just one more. And I'm going to go to a question. I think, Kirsten, based on what you were talking about, this might be a good question for you to pick up. So there are a lot of different applications that we use in provider onboarding and provider data management, from network adequacy determination, site visit documentation, provider recruitment campaigns, provider portals. And I think the question is, are there really any solutions that can tie all of those different functions and systems together in an automated fashion? And what have you seen? Kirsten, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you. We can definitely help companies pull all of those components together along with Appian. But as of today, I'm not seeing really any one off-the-shelf solution that will do all of those things and then provide auditability and trackability.
Okay, so it sounds like if you really want to address that, you may have to go down the custom route and maybe think about low-code solutions in that area. Well, that's great. Well, we are running up close to the top of the hour. I think that's all the questions we have time for today. This is Kate McConnell from Appian, and I want to thank my fellow panelists today. And again, I want to thank HCEG for the opportunity to talk to you today about The Doctor Can't See You Now. new ways to speed up and improve provider onboarding. Hopefully this has been valuable to you, the audience, and hopefully we can now make sure that the doctor can see us all. So I want to turn it back over to Ferris for our final words.
Thank you, Kate. And all of us appreciate the presentation today on these ways to speed up and improve provider onboarding. Clearly from the discussion, technologies such as Lowcode build and blockchain, RPA are having an impact. And we appreciate you, Kate, Fritz, Kirsten, and Ryan for sharing your experience and perspectives. HCEG's overall theme is guiding healthcare executives through innovation, change, and growth, which today's webinar has further accomplished. We will continue our discussions with Appian as a sponsor of an executive leadership roundtable and luncheon during the health conference in Las Vegas, October 30th. The topic will be flying the plane while building it. Do you have what it takes to pilot the transformation of healthcare? And we certainly talk about some of those issues today. You can register for the roundtable at hceg.org/ELR, which stands for Executive Leadership Roundtable, or email Juliana Ruiz at jr@hceg.org for additional information or for a discount code for the health conference. Also watch in a couple of weeks for an invite to participate in the HCEG's 10th Annual National Industry Pulse Survey, where you'll be able to share your personal and organizational insights on the challenges and issues and opportunities facing healthcare in 2020 and beyond. The survey will be a deeper dive into the 2020 HCEG Top 10 list that was just voted on and ranked at our annual forum 3 weeks ago. And finally, plan on joining us in these ongoing discussions over the next year via LinkedIn, Twitter, our biweekly newsletter. Plus, we'd love to have you attend our 32nd annual forum in Boston, September 21st through 23rd, 2020. Thanks again to Appian and each of you as panelists for participating with us, Appian for sponsoring HCEG and for leading this webinar. And thanks again to each of you for participating. Have a great day.